Death. The first thing to say about all deaths is that just as a soul chooses to incarnate at a particular time in order to go about learning a chapter of its education as an energetic, divine being, having human lives and experiences, the time when a being dies is also chosen by the soul. The timing reflects that the soul, through the human living, the earth-bound life, has learned what it needed to learn through that particular incarnation. This is the truth behind all deaths, no matter the circumstances and no matter the apparent reasons behind them. Death for many of you over the numerous lives you have lived as humans on earth has been a very difficult topic. You have very clear ideas about what life is, and therefore your ideas about what death is and what it means are also very clear, yet not many of them are in any way encouraging. Many of you have developed and accepted religious teachings surrounding death, with the result that you spend a great deal of time and energy carrying and living through a fear that if you do not live in a certain way, your death and what comes after will be horrible, worse in fact than the difficult and painful parts of life. I will discuss more on your religious conceptions of death below, but here I would like for you to understand that all of the ways that you have conceived of death have shaped how you choose to live your life. Your fears about death and what follows it have in fact determined just about everything about how you live. Where you believe there are such things as honorable deaths, this has affected many of your choices in many lives. Where you perceive there is such a thing as dishonorable deaths, this has also shaped you in incredibly significant ways. One of the basic facts about being incarnated as humans in the earth dimension that I refer to as time-space is that the particular way that energy is experienced through the physical vehicle you have is unique. When your consciousness is not tied to a physical body, it can see the big picture of why anything and everything has been experienced by you. But it cannot process the elements of this big picture, which is to say heal and release, without a physical body. This is a detail that many of you have not been made aware of, but now it is time that you learn it and understand it deeply. In other words, when your consciousness separates from your physical body at the moment of death, this ability to process energy and therefore karma ends. I tell you this now in order that as we explore death and your history of dealing with and approaching it, you can keep in mind the unique opportunity that each of your human lives is. Also, I tell you this so that you can have some perspective on how insane it is that you have come to shape your lives because you fear death. When you see life as a chance to grow, you are less prone to believing assorted nonsense about what will happen to you after death if you don't follow a bunch of specific rules that are designed to control you and to limit your ability to perceive yourself as divine, powerful, creating beings. In all the ways that you have gone about explaining why death occurs, when and how it does, they are most of them not quite satisfactory to you. Some of you accept death as a fact and have faith or attempt to have faith that when it happens, it is for the best, or that it is happening according to a plan that you cannot conceive of. You are correct that it is part of a plan you have not yet been able to conceive of, but this plan is not the plan of a single being that you cannot come to understand. The plan belongs to you, or more specifically, your soul. Your deaths have been orchestrated to fit the needs of the timing of your soul's development or the journey of your soul, just as your births have been orchestrated. Opening to this truth for many humans represents a major growth opportunity. By doing so, you can choose to take back your feelings of powerlessness surrounding death, and you can begin to come to alignment with the truth of what you really are. A divine being creating exactly the right and best experiences for yourself as a soul, a portion of divinity, to learn about living human lives. By doing this, you can also come to enjoy living on a deeper and richer level, understanding why you create what you do for yourself to experience. You have experienced many different means of death in your various lives. Some of you create themes of experience that you repeat again and again, such as dying young, dying traumatically, and dying of illness. Others of you do not create such patterns. When you have done so, it is because you have attached a meaning to the ways that you have died in your various lives. By carrying such meaning, you in other lives recreate those experiences just as you recreate any and all karma, that is, by holding a knot in your energetic field and thereby drawing the sort of scenario to you again that was the impetus for forming the karmic belief in the first place. Some of you have died in various ways and not attached meaning to it, with the result that you have not formed a knot in your energetic field about that way of dying, and you therefore do not need to recreate certain routes to death or means of dying again and again for yourself. In other words, while many of you fear death, not all of you are currently stuck in fear about particular kinds of death. For some of you, even reading this passage gives you trouble. It can be difficult to think about death, and I'm putting your attention on it in a direct way. I understand that this may be the case, and I want you to remember that I am offering this information in support of you, healing what from your past has been left unresolved. How you have died, for many of you, is a major outstanding issue that is in dire need of healing at this time. Look at the fears that you have about life. Many of them are attributable to the ways that you have died in your soul's other lives as a human. I will use the channel Seth as an example of someone who has carried fears rooted in such experiences. I have his permission to do so. One fear that has surfaced at various times in his life is that he will not be able to breathe. Another is to be confined to small spaces or to have his head surrounded or wrapped in anything. He perceives a need to have fresh air as much as possible. All of this is rooted in a handful of lives in which he drowned or was strangled, once drowning after having a bag put on and tied around his head. Seth became aware of this particular experience through past life regression with a hypnotherapist. Once he was aware of that particular life, he became aware not just about how strong this fear was, but how many parts of his life it affected. As one example, before becoming conscious of those deaths, he was preparing to learn to ride a motorcycle when he first put on a full-faced helmet. This fear came up very loudly for him to experience. A part of him felt the worst was about to come, or to say it a better way, the worst was about to repeat itself. He dealt with it in the moment, recognizing that it was a fear from a past life. He was about to ground and calm down after a few moments and proceed with the motorcycle class. But when it first surfaced, the intensity of the rush of fear emotions was almost overwhelming. When you experience such a memory, it often threatens to overwhelm you, or it does. And so I encourage you to learn to ground deeply so that you can come to manage these situations with conscious intention and work through them. Look at the fears that you have about anything in life. Look into them and the feelings that come with them. Are you afraid because you do not know what will happen in a particular scenario? Or are you afraid because a part of you knows precisely what will happen? If the former, it is a general sort of fear that is likely related to something specific in your karmic past, or your past or present social, cultural, or familial conditioning. If the latter, it is likely a direct result of a deep but present memory from one or more of your soul's other lives about your experiences being seriously injured or dying. It is my intention in all of my teachings to bring you into greater awareness of whatever from the past still trips you up and gives you difficulty, whatever it is that keeps you from living in the present tense and thereby inhabiting your true natures as powerfully creative divine beings. This section of the teaching is not intended to stir things up for you in a difficult way, but it may nonetheless do so. Please understand that everything unresolved within you can in fact be healed, but for this to happen, everything must first be brought into conscious awareness, and that is what we are doing here together now. Are you afraid of confined spaces? What about needles or knives? Are you nervous about being around large animals or near the edge of high cliffs? Are you afraid of heights, or are you simply afraid of losing your bearings or footing when at a height? Are you afraid of guns, or those who carry them? Are you afraid of driving in a car, or driving fast in a car or other vehicle? Are you afraid of being near or submersed in water? Are you afraid to eat certain foods? Are you afraid of being out of the house alone after dark? Are you afraid of being alone in the woods? Are you afraid of running out of food? Are you afraid of becoming pregnant or birthing children? Have you ever been afraid of going to sleep? Look at your fears. Observe with detachment the parts of you that hold on to these fears. These parts of you are those that are terrified of repeating painful pasts. And again, I tell you that you can heal these parts of you. You have to be consciously aware of what it is that they are feeling and fearing. The next piece to look into surrounding death is the meaning that gets attached to why you die. As mentioned earlier, you have numerous religious teachings that seem intended to attempt to help you cope with the reality of death. Most of them, however, succeed only in terrifying you into living a certain kind of life, so that you might, you believe, ensure that your death and what comes after do not have to be horrific. Death is a great unknown to the vast majority of you, and as such you cannot prove or disprove what these religions have taught you. Some of you instinctively feel that what you are taught is not true, or perhaps it is not the entire truth, and most of you, suspecting this, have kept your mouths shut in order to remain acceptable to your people and the religions themselves. As a result of not being able to prove or disprove their teachings, these religions have thrived on creating in you and constantly perpetuating your fear of death, so that you will agree to live a certain kind of life that they themselves have outlined and judged as good. The people who have created, developed, and propagated your religions have had remarkably little insight into death. Yet since you have no one else telling you what will happen at the time with confidence and authority, you have felt forced to believe them. Understand that this process of essentially being misled about death and misled about life has been an important one in your evolution of learning to whom to listen to, in learning about the fact that you do not need an intermediary to know God. Now that you are ready to remember yourselves as God, leaving behind the prevalent teachings of earth religions about death comes to the fore as a critical process for you to undergo. There is a great deal of self-judgment that you have taken on that results from having believed these religious teachings. I am not going to spell out which teachings I am referring to here, as my intention is that you become aware of your thought and emotional processes, and what it is that you might fear surrounding death, not to criticize specific traditions you have adopted to aid you in your living. You are the only judge of whether something works for you, and I seek to relay to you my perspective as a discarnate being who observes you and what unfolds on your planet with detachment and has done so for a very long time. The self-judgment keeps you in check so that you will live according to certain social laws and mores. This judgment functions to keep you afraid of knowing your true natures, as in that state of self-knowledge, being clear that you are a divine being creating your reality and accepting responsibility for it all. You cannot be controlled. These religions have served an important purpose on earth for a very long time, and that is to control you, to inspire you to identify as one small portion of your being in order that you fit in and belong and can be acceptable to a group, which is all about control. Control is about fear, and you can never be happy and healthy and can never inhabit your true natures as divine beings having human experiences if you are locked into states of fear. It is time for you to see that in order to make you feel you have no choice but to live in socially acceptable ways, a great deal of energy has been spent making you fear the sort of death you will experience if you make choices that are socially unacceptable. It is time that you understand the depths to which this manipulation has become rooted in your individual and collective psyches. As certain religions have admittedly developed on your planet as a response to serving the needs of the people when it comes to the spiritual side of life, they have also, in many cases, at many times and for many reasons, capitalized on your fears. Death is a major category of fears that they have instilled in you and continually triggered you into fearing. The depth of your self-judgment about living in certain ways runs deep. You are handed a definition of soul that has been edited in order to support the agenda of the religions under which you have lived in fear. Your incredibly deep need to know God has been exploited by these religions at many times and in many ways, and you have been taught to forget that you yourself are God, part of all that is. Reclaiming this knowledge of your true nature is imperative at this time, and this is why I am coming through this channel, so that you can know more about your true nature and leave all other conceptions and beliefs, those about yourselves that are not true, and have been handed to you in order to keep you ignorant of your true nature and therefore power behind. What is your reaction each time you read my mention of your self-judgment? I have intentionally begun each of the last 3 paragraphs mentioning it and how deep it is, while not commenting further on it. I have done this to stir you to become aware of any reaction you might have to being repeatedly told that you judge yourself. The judgments that you have taken on from others, specifically from those who have been purporting to teach you about death, have left you powerless. In this context, you have come to believe that you must please an invisible being in order to avoid suffering. I intend to reveal to you how to bring yourselves back to a state of empowerment, because it is critical at this time that you shift your perspectives on yourself and the world and come back to inhabiting your true natures as divine beings. It is not the nature of divine beings to understand themselves only as powerless. While that is part of the process of learning empowerment, you as individuals and as a collective are now ready to add to your learning in what ways you are and have always been incredibly powerful. All that has come before has served its purpose and is therefore perfect, and now it is time for a new chapter to unfold within your awareness. Who is it that's keeping score about how you live and what kind of life and death you deserve? The answer, of course, is no one but yourself. Who cares what you choose? No one but yourself. Should you limit your life in order that you can ensure that you will not suffer after death? Should you believe that you can ensure that after death you do not have to suffer? If you do not believe this, is it because you feel you are already too far gone and do not possibly deserve not to suffer? Or is it that you do not believe that there is suffering after death? Or is it that you believe that there is or might be suffering after death, but do not believe that a person can ensure anything? Look deeply within yourself and take inventory of each and every single part of you that has an opinion. This is how you can learn what parts of you, if any, need to be brought to the present tense. Now I would like to tell you about what happens when you die. There are people on earth who have learned these truths from me and other beings like me, and so some of this might not be new to you. I invite you to read it in the context of my teachings to you that you are a powerful being, only temporarily believing that you are powerless. At the moment of death, your consciousness separates from your physical body. Your consciousness is not the same as your soul. Since your soul exists outside time and your consciousness is actively tied to your physical body while you are still alive on earth, you can think of the portion of your consciousness that is tied to your physical body as an extension of your soul. Depending on the circumstances of your death and your beliefs about life, death, the body, the soul, and what happens at and after death, there are several different things that can happen in regard to this newly separated consciousness. One is that it becomes aware that its physical body has died and that things are changing. In these cases, other beings that are not embodied can come into awareness, and these other beings can assist the newly separated consciousness in adapting to this new phase of reality. Another is that it does not become aware of the change that the body has ceased to live. This can result in the newly separated consciousness wandering off and attempting to interact with the manifest reality of the time-space dimension in which Earth exists in order to continue life as usual. But most humans who are alive, whose consciousnesses are tied to their physical bodies, will not see the consciousness, and it can be confused about why. You have people who function as psychic mediums who have awareness of such separated consciousnesses and assist them in various ways. I will not explore this today in the depth that it deserves, but I will say that this function is an extremely important one related to the energetic shifts that are taking place on Earth now, because as more of you become conscious of yourselves as multidimensional beings, more of you will have contact with the spirits of dead people who are in need of support to transition to their next phase. This awareness is not to be feared, but to be understood as having the potential to offer a service to the living and the dead alike. These services include supporting the living and dead in completing their karmic business together, and as such is very important to the healing process awaiting many. For those newly separated consciousnesses who understand, are open to learning the fact that they have separated from their bodies and that those bodies are no longer living, there is a process of orientation that can occur. They learn about their lives and why they unfolded as they did. They see the purposes of all their important relationships, experiences, and choices. They have the opportunity to make peace with all that they choose and experienced as part of the necessary learning of their souls. There is no timeline associated with this process, because the soul exists outside time, and this newly separated consciousness is an extension of soul. The soul has already chosen the next life and all the others because it exists outside time. Some of you have been taught that there is a time period of learning after a life is ended, and then the soul chooses its next life as a continuation of this one, or a continuation of the themes or learning of this one. Yet the truth is that all of your lives are chosen outside of time. A useful picture I have used to explain this process to our channel is to imagine a soul sitting in a conference room with its helpers and guidance team. All along the walls are television monitors depicting discrete lives happening along the Earth timeline. The soul observes the lives, its own lives, unfolding on these screens, and through observing them understands what it means to live lives as a human. Say that one of your major life themes the soul has chosen to learn about is safety and security. On this monitor over here, there is a human life of this soul depicted in which the human manifestation of this soul has a comfortable home, steady employment, healthy relationships with his or her family, and feels very safe and secure. The soul learns from this exactly what it needs to learn. On that monitor over there is another human life of this soul, depicted in which the human manifestation of this soul has lost his or her home due to a catastrophic weather event, and the entire clan and community has been displaced. They must now wander off in search of a new place to live in order to start over. In this second life, the human manifestation of that soul has no security. This life teaches the soul about safety and security in the same precise way as the first life I described. The soul observes the effects of its human manifestation's choices. It also observes the interplay of those choices and the social, economic, political, religious, and filial climates in play in all of its various lives. It learns through this variety. Through this variety and all the permutations of choice and the expression of free will in many different ways and to different ends, the soul learns all that it needs to learn through a collection of lives spread out over the Earth timeline. And so, at the moment of death, the descent that this portion of consciousness of a particular soul has made into the Earth time-space dimension comes to an end. By this descent, I mean the extension of the soul into the portion of consciousness that was tied to the physical body of the particular human in question. There is a debriefing process whereby this portion of consciousness gains perspective of all that has happened in the life and how that has benefited the learning of the soul. Once this perspective is understood, the soul has learned and processed all it needs to learn from that particular chapter of life experience. Now, this is all happening outside of time. So it is only in your earthbound way of experiencing things has something ended. The soul's journey encompasses the entirety of the earth timeline, and for it nothing ends. Outside of time, it observes all that happens in all of its various lives along the earth timeline, and in that process understands what it is to be a human, to be a portion of the divine learning about itself as a variety of humans. This debriefing process can be seen as the portion of consciousness that was tied to the physical body for the duration of the particular human life, beginning to re-emerge with the soul, to rejoin the source of its consciousness. The learning in this phase, once the consciousness is separated from the body, encompasses surrendering a sense of egoic separateness and remembering that it is a part of all that is. While you are alive, you most certainly can achieve this. All of your meditative practices and consciousness-altering practices aim to do this. I am stepping forward now in order to offer you my perspective on what have been the missing pieces in the evolution of your consciousness. It is clear to me that you are ready to gain this awareness, not just of your true nature, but the extent of your true creative powers as divine beings. You can expand your consciousness while you are living in this present body of yours, now more than ever, in fact, which is to say that because of the changes taking place at this time within the energetic backdrop that supports all life on Earth, your capacity to do so is augmented. Death is the great unknown. Only because you have agreed to temporarily forget these truths about your nature as a divine being. You have agreed to forget so that you can experience all that you can as human and feel all you can feel. You live as an actor who has completely surrendered to his or her role, losing track of what is really going on outside the confines of the small and manufactured set on which he or she performs the role, where he or she came from, and what choices are available to him or her. My purpose through these teachings is to help you remember so that your experience as a human can be enriched and so that you can come out of a powerlessness about what has happened to you, and for you to no longer feel or be defeated because you have experienced all that you have experienced. As your consciousnesses evolve, you have more access to memories from all portions of your consciousness. These parts of your being that are rooted or anchored in your soul. As your consciousnesses evolve, you have more access to memories from all portions of your consciousness, these parts of your being that are rooted or anchored in your soul. Becoming more aware of how you and your lives really work, you can choose to inhabit your divine power and choose to cease feeling powerless about what is happening within and around you. Your experiences and beliefs surrounding death will alter in significant ways, and you will no longer forget your true natures and thereby be disempowered when it comes to considering and understanding death. Now it is time to explore from a specific angle some of the fears that you have about death that have to do with the history of feeling abandoned by God, Goddess, Mother Earth, the universe, Creator, or another name or conception of deity that resonates with you. For many of you, it is inconceivable that there could be anything or being loving or supportive waiting for you after death, because you have come to believe in very deep ways, in very deep parts of you, that the universe is not a friendly place. You have observed the reality of suffering on your planet, which has intensified over time as a result of the suspicion that there is no deity or divine mother protecting you. You have decided that there is a reason for all the suffering in the world, and it is that there is no divine love. Unraveling this web to find the sources of this prevalent mindset is complex. For our purposes here of discussing death and your fears related to it, I will say that at one time your collective relationship with the planet and all the life forms on it was approached in what I will call an organic way. This way of life accepted the realities of the functions and cycles of nature, and you accepted death as you accepted life, related to, part of, and a reflection of the cycles of nature. You conceived of yourselves as part of nature. In other words, you accepted that your fate was the same as for other members of the community of life on Earth. You did not expect special treatment, and you did not find the reality of suffering confusing. You did not take suffering personally. Then a time came when it was time for you to explore new conceptions of who you really are. There is much material from me and from others about this slow but vast change on Earth, one feature of which is a distancing of humans from conceiving of yourselves as part of nature. You came to think of yourselves as superior to other species and decided that your minds and your mental acuity were proof that you are better than other life forms on the planet. Many of you grieve this turn of events, but it was a necessary chapter of your learning about how to understand yourselves as divine beings, that you have a choice to change your minds about who you really are. At this present moment in your evolution, you are finding it necessary to reconceive who you are once again. Each of these shifts in self-conception and conception of nature, the world, and how you fit into it is a result of growing pains. And it is now true also that as you feel driven to rethink your true nature, you are doing so as a result of some necessary and deep growing pains. A part of this shift was that you no longer conceived of the earth as your mother. Previous to this, the earth was felt to be your mother and protector. When you understood the cycles of nature and felt that you were a part of them, you felt protected by your mother, Earth. You did not feel powerless and perceive yourselves to be alone. Making an incredibly long story short, footnote, see Goddess past, present, and future. End of footnote. When you shifted out of this, you no longer could find peace in the fact of death. You began to see yourselves as superior beings, but still subject to the crude laws of nature, and it was difficult to reconcile your idea of yourselves as superior with the facts of the laws of nature, laws you cannot escape no matter what you tell yourselves you are. Now it has been thousands of years that you have struggled with this. One result is the creation of religions that teach you about how to live and how to please one God or another, so that you can thereby attempt to deal with the crude and cruel laws of nature. There is a single inescapable fact, and it is that you will die. But if you maintain a conception that you are separate from the rest of nature, you cannot and will not be able to understand why suffering and death occur in the ways that they do. You cannot understand why, if you are so great and wonderful and so evolved, you still have to suffer in the same ways as all the unevolved and unintelligent creatures on the planet. Can you see how this shift in perspective has led you to fear death? It became apparent to you that the divine that you had always counted on to help you understand how your lives unfolded and how your deaths occurred could no longer be counted upon. You decided that you no longer had a place in the scheme of things, that you did not belong. You perceived that you were abandoned by your mother, left to disconnect from her and her love, and then die alone. In time, the memories of this feeling of abandonment have been covered over by a great many ideas, perspectives, beliefs, and approaches to life and death. But at the core of your fears about death exists a sense of loss, that your divine mother has abandoned you. And the pain of this separation is deep. It directly shapes how you conceive of death, which in turn shapes how you conceive of life. And as we have been exploring here and elsewhere, you possess great powers of creation in manifesting a world around you that reflects what you think is happening and what you believe. From one vantage point, you never die. You also have religions that teach you this, and this perspective among all your perspectives is the most true. As you connect more with yourselves as multidimensional beings, you will feel this is true. You are in the process of beginning to work with many incarnations of your souls along the Earth timeline, recovering access to memories from many of your different lives. When you choose to be consciously connected to your multidimensional self on a consistent basis, and once this version of self-identity feels like the real to you, you will grasp this truth firsthand. You will shift into a conception of self that encompasses many lives and ideas of who you are, and you will open to yourself as a limitless being having a plenitude of discrete incarnations along the Earth timeline. Another aspect of the fear of death to explore is that you fear a meaningless death if you perceive that you are living a meaningless life. See how the fears of death and what will or may come after if you do not live as prescribed may have, in a certain way, controlled some of your choices in life. You possess some form of spirit of adventure and varied passions, and many of you shy away from these natural sides of yourselves, just in case in the end you will experience a horrible death, and an even worse eternity after death. What feels meaningful to you? What kinds of experiences do you crave to have? What kind of life experiences do you need in order to feel alive? What are you willing to do to feel alive, to feel yourself fully inhabiting yourself? In all ways that you have edited your natural sense of being alive in order to ensure that you do not have to experience a horrific death and eternity following death, it is now time for you to shift your perspective and experience. The time that you have set aside as available to you in any given life is precious. It is the landscape of your learning about yourself and each other as all that is. When you edit yourself, it is part of the process of learning, of course. But so many of you are ready to step into inhabiting yourselves more fully. So many of you are ready to begin expressing yourselves as the divine creators that you are. Look at how your edits of self, because of social or family pressure, have served to distance you from yourself. Open yourself to feel how deep are the rifts within you that you have voluntarily introduced into your energetic field in order that you can ensure that you will be acceptable and loved, and that your security, safety, and survival would be ensured. I invite you to become clear on just how far you may be from inhabiting yourself and make the commitment to do what it takes to leave this old conditioning and these old ideas of who you are behind, so that you can begin feeling free to be exactly who you really are.